18th. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer. And again, if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to pop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to attend to them now or in the future.
Great. Thanks, Mariah. Yes, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Jennifer Kennedy, and I'm happy to be spending the morning with you all. Of course, we're excited to get together, but we're also really pleased to partner with you all in this next phase of HDS care coordination and all of its growth and development. And like Mariah said, later this morning, she'll talk us through some of that care coordination history and how we arrived at this moment. But to get us started, we're going to do first an icebreaker, and that we know that the best part of our trainings is often when you get to connect with your coworkers and your colleagues from other regions. So we hope that we'll be able to foster that a little bit, and maybe you'll see a familiar face or you will meet a new person or two. So besides connecting with each other, this icebreaker, we hope to have us focus on identifying HDS elements and how they build protective factors for families. The activity will draw on what you already know about HDS services and how you're currently already supporting families with HDS care coordination. And like Mariah mentioned, it will also build on what you learned about protective factors in the pre-training activities. And again, we understand that life happens and not all of you will have done some of the pre-training activities, but we're just going to learn together. So we'll be splitting you guys all into 5 groups, 1 for each protective factor. And we'd like you to first introduce yourself. And again, hopefully you'll meet a new friend or two. And then work with your group to identify at least 5 ways that HDS services and care coordination help families build that particular protective factor. So again, we're splitting you each into a protective factor group discussion. So these could be engagement strategies, services, or other supports within HDS. So you'll have a chance to brainstorm together. So please pick someone to take notes, and there will be a share back to the larger group. And we'll use this conversation to build an infographic so that you'll be able to refer to as we think about HDS and how it provides those supports for building protective factors. So you'll have about 10 minutes, and then we will give you 1 minute to wrap up. So before we push you into the groups, I want to share, Mariah, if you could advance the slide. So these are the protective factor domains, and I did have an opportunity to put the PowerPoint into your chat box, or into the chat box if you needed to access this or refer to this during your conversation. So I think at that, we can go to the next slide, and we'll be breaking you into groups of about 6 or so. And Megan's going to help me with that. And you guys will have an opportunity, screen dialog box will pop up and you just click join.
Flavia may have had to step away. She said she'd be kind of in and out because she's in clinic today. I'm not going to join a group. I hadn't planned on it, but thank you for putting me in in one, Megan.
I had to tell Jennifer to be like, I have to stay out of the breakout groups.
Yeah, they don't need our support for this.
Do you think I should broadcast in one direction?
Oh wait, I couldn't hear you, Megan.
I couldn't hear you either.
I'm going to try to put any instructions in the broadcasting a message to everyone.
They know, so they know their group number because that was something that wasn't shared. Like she didn't really walk through the slide. Were you able to label the?
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully they know.
What their protective factors?
Yes. Do you want to maybe broadcast that, Megan? Your protective factor is the title of your group or something?
Yes, I will. Do you want me to?
Sorry, I don't know. I could probably do that. I
That's okay.
haven't.
And then tell them to come up with five ways.
Yeah, you can remind them of the instructions because it doesn't have that on the slide either.
Yeah, I had to pull up your talking points to remind myself what's happening.
Right, this one's going to be different than copy and paste, but I think this will be helpful. Oh, wait a second.
Awesome. So while we're hanging out, Mariah, I got a little bit of an extension on the Help Me Grow fidelity assessment
Mm-hmm.
because Dulce has actually been communicating with Heather,
Uh-huh.
and that survey, Dulce is completing a lot of it, but I told her we had our answers too, so we're going to put them together.
Oh,
She's
nice.
actually pulling the data to complete the survey somehow. So, and then she sent me a spreadsheet of what people have submitted so far because Heather gave it to her just so we'd have an idea of what to write.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's
So,
interesting.
so she's pretty engaged in it.
Yeah. Well, I
But
am
I'm
going to.
supposed, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to say I'm going to loosely mention it today when I talk about the bigger picture.
Awesome.
I think, as I was doing the prepping for this training and it a lot of the framing that I have for some of this is it parallels the way that you frame an evidence-based model. So that there's like day one framing in HFA, day one framing in baby talk that kind of anchors with the bigger picture, the outside model, really kind of like plugging the program into the larger narrative, which I know is a little, we don't typically do that in HDS for providers, but it's nice to feel like you're a part of something bigger.
Bigger, yeah.
Yeah. A bigger movement, a bigger shift and impact.
And there's some folks on these Help Me Grow like email strings that are really engaged. There's somebody who, where is she from? She's from YOLO, and she's really on top of it.
YOLO has pretty cool stuff going on. I mean, they've created some pretty, I shared it a few months ago, but they've created some really supportive materials, like parenting materials, like, and they're of the nature that they could go to any community. So they've done some cool stuff.
Well, I guess the biggest conversation now is trying to kind of marry what Help Me Grow National is asking for and Help Me Grow California. So Heather's trying to pull a conference call together for people just to discuss that piece, which I'll probably join, but I don't know, like just for listening.
Yeah.
Hi, ladies. We have someone joining us by phone. I'm wondering if they can keep themselves off and introduce themselves.
Good morning.
Well, we're in breakout groups right now, so you're not hearing any audio from the peer coordination training. But if you could, when you have a moment, keep yourself off of mute and know who you are. Do either of you recognize that phone number?
Mm, but I can look quickly.
Yeah, I don't
Our
know.
directory.
Break out the sleuth slut. Crazy ex-girlfriend tactics. Uh,
Oh, God.
I knew someday those would come in handy, even if it is 20 years later.
Yeah. Not care coordination.
I got to train on Healthy Families' new LMS.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty fancy.
Really?
It's got cool bells and whistles. Like if you're assigned to watch a video that's like 20 minutes long, like you try to say like, well, I'm going to skip that activity. It stops you in the middle and asks you a question that comes directly from the in-person training for you to like reflect on in that moment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mhm. Um, Megan, I might put some instruction, kind of what they do at the commission meeting. So,
What do you mean instruction?
so at the commission meeting, when folks either call in or join by computer, but their name isn't clearly written, we ask people to rename themselves. But actually, I'm not sure how you can do it if you're on a phone.
We could do it for them if they would give us a heads up who they are.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just gave them the 1 minute warning in group.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay. My sleuthing didn't work.
Now they're gone. Okie dokie.
Were
That
they a
was weird.
voyeur?
Like they didn't say anything. Like, did they know we were talking about them?
Not sure. It just opened up.
Okay. All right. Well, people are back.
Welcome back, everyone. I think you all should be back with us. Thank you for that brainstorm. I think what we'd like to do is open it up for a large group discussion. So if I'm going to, go through the different groups and call on you, if you could share a couple strategies you guys came up with, or how HDS is helping families build protective factors, build that particular protective factor. We'd love to hear from you. And again, if you could put, after you share, if you could put your more complete notes in the chat box or email me, that would be great, because we would like to build that infographic that I was talking about. So the first group was my group, Parental Resilience, and Lauren was going to represent our group. So Lauren, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off and sharing, I think you can unmute yourself and share with the larger group.
Yeah, so we had parental resilience, how they manage stress and tackle those kind of things in their daily life. And we talked about, as care coordinators, we do a lot of validating, providing support and resources for things that may be stressful going on in their lives, making sure that they know they're not alone. But we also talked a lot about our behavior services and how they really do have an emphasis on self-care and co-regulation and actual strategies for parents to manage that stress in these stressful situations that they might find themselves in, either with a typical behavior or something COVID related and kind of in our crazy world right now. But definitely kind of at all aspects between care coordination, behavior, and even a little bit of the dev services, getting support and education for managing those stressors and resources for managing that stress.
Thanks, Lauren. And if the second group, who tackled social and emotional competence of children, did you have someone that wanted to share? You could unmute yourself. And again, you guys could all use the chat box if you have other ideas around how to support a particular protective factor.
Asked me to do it, so I'll share. So
Okay.
we're talking about the changes in terms of dealing with social emotional competence, how HDS started, providing core services, which at the time were development, and eventually we started providing behaviors and went through several different programs until we found the one that worked the best. And basically, we said, we don't use terminology that the parents don't understand, like social emotional competency or self-regulation or help regulate your child. What we do is we teach them strategies to deal with children's behavior a different way. That coaching really helps a lot, because now the parents, especially on telehealth, have to do it themselves. And we help them understand their children and also help families connecting with their own families, being aware of their needs and learning how to manage and interpret the behaviors a different way.
Thank you, Susan. The group that tackled knowledge of parenting and child development. If you wouldn't mind sharing a couple of strategies that you guys came up with, how HDS helps build that particular protective factor. Let's see.
I can share. So we talked about basically HDS is in itself, while we provide different services, we are the key purpose of our program is really to provide a lot of valuable knowledge of parenting and child development to families that engage with us. Starting from at the level 1, the different groups, baby steps, developmental classes, those are all there to provide families with modeling and educations of different just understandings of social emotional and all development throughout different domains. We have level 2, 3 services that families get to engage with. Licensed providers, SLP, OTPT, those are all ways to kind of gain those knowledge about how to support their child to meet developmental milestones. And we also talked about peer-to-peer within those service groups. Parents they have a wealth of knowledge as they learn different things. You know, now there's source of information from internet and things like that. So there's a lot of peer-to-peer kind of sharing as well. So that kind of ties back to that social connection kind of piece that's the other protective factor. And I feel like, and even in assessment, as parents go through ASQ screenings, and you know, those screenings are all, and itself is also a way to learn, you know, what are some of the things that I could do with my child to promote his or her development. That's also one way to gain some knowledge about appropriate child development as well.
Thanks, Julia. And you pointed out like what is so wonderful about HDS is that it's like perfectly aligned with this particular protective factor about building knowledge. But also what we, in our group too, we realized how interconnected all the protective factors are, and there's going to be overlap. And so thank you for pointing out like how even our classes also have that social connections piece as well, and we'll get into that in just a minute. So thanks for sharing, Julia. The group that looked at concrete support in times of need, if one of you wouldn't mind sharing some of your discussion that you had.
Yeah, so for concrete support in times of need, our group really focused on some of the questions that were shown and displayed in the family profile. So we really appreciated that. I just want to read the definition a little bit below because I just love the context. It's access to support and or services that address a family's needs and helps minimize stress caused by challenges. So I love the wording there. That's truly what the care coordination team is doing. We're eliminating any barriers that the family is currently facing, and we're really focusing on basic needs and concrete information that the family needs now. It's really hard for them to focus on services if they're going home and there's a scarcity of food, or maybe they're unemployed and they don't have financial stability. So what can a care coordinator do is provide resources. How can we help the family eliminate any barriers? Can we give them employment resources or financial support? Can we get them connected to CalFresh or WIC or any food banks if food scarcity is an issue? We also really focused on if transportation was a barrier, how can we help alleviate that? You know, can we give them bus passes? Can we connect to their insurance to be able to provide transportation? So I really love this section because it's approaching the family as a whole and what are they not having at home and how can we help them be successful in their home life and have some stability of the resources that they need. And I think the care coordination team does such a beautiful job providing resources to families and is able to really support that.
Thanks, Natasha. That was very well put. And it sounds like just underscoring the importance of your role as care coordinators when this is such an important part of just addressing some of their basic needs before they're able to engage in services and having that whole family approach. So thank you, Natasha.
Just wanted to comment on that as well, because I think it gets back to the underlying framework of the protective factors, in that protective factors have been identified as the components that prevent child abuse and neglect, right? And so we often don't think about the impact of getting a bus pass for someone. That reduces the stress in someone's home so that they can be more present, because when we talk about neglect, we're talking just as much about like emotional neglect. So again, I know that's not kind of like an objective of our service, but through these supports that we provide, we are intervening at this level, even if it is not the core objective of the work that we're doing. So I think that's something important for you guys to hold in mind and how powerful your role is.
Thanks, Mariah. And just that ripple effect,
Mm-hmm.
that one little supportive conversation you can have with a family can make the difference. So thank you. The group that looked at social connections, would you guys like to have your spokesperson share with us?
Sure. Hi everyone. So we have social connections. So me as a care coordinator, whenever I conduct the FEAT assessment, we like to emphasize the importance of having outside support. So we always ask for parents to identify who is their support system, whether it's a neighbor, a friend, a counselor, a coworker, just somebody they can count on during times of stress. For the developmental specialists, their classes, the developmental classes, give parents an opportunity to interact with other parents, to share about their similar experiences. So that's a really good opportunity to build more social connections there. And then, so all of the regions in my group, we all do case consultations where we help identify if the parents have support and resources outside the resources that we're able to provide.
Thank you, Leonore.
Oh.
And I thank you for also mentioning the case consultations, because not only does that, build that integration within your teams and support like the whole family and look at it from all different perspectives, but it sounds like you guys also identify what other protective factor supports that the families need, in those conversations. So that's wonderful. So, well, thank you guys. And just another reminder, if the folks who took notes, if you wouldn't mind popping me an email or even a screenshot of your notes. You don't have to spend a lot of time typing it up or anything. Just, send an image, and then I can capture all that on the infographic. And we'll debut a draft of that in a couple weeks, maybe when we see you again. So thanks everyone for participating. And Mariah is going to now lead us in a little regulation reboot. Thanks.
Right, everyone. So go ahead and take a 3-minute break. It is 10:37, so we'll have you come back at about 10:41, and feel free to turn off your camera, and just when you get back, turn it on, and that'll let us know that you guys are ready to convene. But take care of whatever you need.
That includes you, Mariah.
No, I don't. I do pay attention to who takes these breaks, but I don't typically take them unless I have to go to the restroom. But I will sip my water. That I will do.
Okay, let's sip our water together.
And adjust my bouncy seat because it's a little uncomfortable.
Oh, I'll pause the recording. How about that?
Our own lives and everything that's going on. So we really want to bring attention and opportunity and repetitive practice to this idea of a regulation reboot, an opportunity to take us outside of our survival centers of our brain or our brainstem, our fight, flight, freeze response, and start to move through our emotional center and back into our thinking center, right? Because especially for a training, we need to be up in the cortex to really take advantage. And we need to do this for all of our work, right? But sometimes life gets busy and we miss those opportunities. So we like to build this in. And with building this in, even just the act of getting up and moving your body to go to the restroom, having a sip of water, those are all good ways to kind of recenter with yourself and bring attention to your body and notice how you're feeling. I also like to engage in some type of thoughtful movement activity. So we'll do a brief practice. I normally do this standing up, and you could do it standing up, but I thought if it's simpler, you might be even more inclined to try it. So in development, we talk a lot about children learning to cross the midline. As adults, this skill is still important, and it's still very integrating to integrate the left and right hemispheres of our brain. So I'm going to ask you to do a seated cross crawl. Whenever we do a kind of grounding activity, I think it's really important, again, to bring that attention to your body. Find your sit bones in your seat, lift up the core, right? When we talk about babies learning to crawl, it's because they've got that strong core, that strong center of their body. So bring that attention there. Pretend like you've got that nice 6-pack abs. That's where all the oxygen can fill. Take a good breath, bring your shoulders back. Again, just really grounding attention to your body. And then we're just going to cross the midline. So here's my hands. I apologize that you can't see this. And I'm going to bring my opposite hand to this hand to my opposite knee and tap, 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 tap. As you're tapping your knees and crossing the midline there, you can be crossing the midline with your eyes, with your vision. So you'll see my eyes looking weird. That's because I'm going back and forth. And you'll feel yourself get slightly discombobulated, but it's an opportunity to integrate. And if you're getting a little confused, that's okay. There's not a right or wrong. You're still bringing attention to your body. Let's take a few minutes to focus on that and not anything else. Notice when your hand hits your leg, skin to skin. And notice how your body kind of starts to roll with the rhythm, right? This is part of that grounding experience. Instead of worrying about everything on the outside, we're focusing on what's happening to us in this moment. All right. Let's take another good breath. Try to bring that in, bring ourselves back. I saw some good breaths there. Very nice. Jennifer even brought in a stretch. Just whatever we need to kind of reintegrate ourselves. And I invite you to try to bring this practice in on the daily. It doesn't have to be this particular practice, but finding a time. And that's why we have these fancy phones that we can set with buzzes and whistles to remind us we need that regulation reboot, so that you can take care of yourself and be present. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Pradeep to talk a little bit more about some of these topics.
Great. Thank you, Mariah. And Mariah, you're going to run the, oh, there we go. So good morning, everybody. It's so great to be together. I wish we were in person. I think we all are missing that. And, you know, when Mariah asked me to talk about stress and how that affects child development, it made me think about the fact that, you know, really, I've talked a lot about stress and trauma these days, but what I really want to talk about is nurture. And that's really where we start, and that's our why. So I want to ground us in our why, and what we really are all about is nurture. And I think that's the thing with HDS, and particularly with care coordination, just the aspect of nurture, which is really, when you define it, is just to care for and encourage the growth and development of. Wow, that's HDS, isn't it? And ideally, parents and caregivers are available, tuned, and interested. And again, this is what we're going to be doing together in care coordination and all of our other work is. And so I just want to keep us focused on that and understand that trauma and stress can pull us away from that. So our job is to enhance and restore nurture. Next slide, please, Mariah. And again, why nurture is so important. It really just, it builds better brains, healthy attachment, social emotional intelligence, self-regulation, and resiliency. And that's something we just really want to emphasize, is that the concept of resiliency is talked a lot about. People talk about resiliency a lot these days. And they make it sound like it's some characteristic you have or you don't have. But the important part is that resiliency is really developed in the context of relationships, and particularly with regulation and co-regulation. And care coordination really just does an amazing job of helping parents regulate. Now, as Susan Nevitt said earlier, we don't talk about regulation. We show them skills and teach them techniques so that they get it and they feel it. And so it's not about the words, it's about what they do. And so that is a huge part of our success, is our ability to teach parents how to regulate themselves so that they can be there for their kids. And we do that through the parallel process from using ourselves to do that. Next slide, please. I wish I could see everybody's faces so I could ask how many people know about the ACEs. So this is just a summary slide of the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this is a groundbreaking study that was done in the late 1990s here in San Diego by a physician named Vincent Felitti and Robert Onda from the CDC. And they looked at a huge number, 17,000 plus individuals, and they asked them to remember back to their childhood, and did they have these experiences that were called adverse childhood experiences. Then what they did was they looked and they saw what their health behaviors and their physical and mental health outcomes. And so the more adverse childhood experiences you had, the more you had problems in terms of health related behaviors, as well as physical and mental health. I can do a whole presentation on this, but we'll just come back to the fact that ACEs are strongly related to the development and prevalence of a large number of health problems throughout a person's lifespan. But they are not destiny, and relationships can mitigate trauma. And so for those of you who got to go to We Can't Wait, saw my colleague Bob Segi, who talks about hope, health outcomes through positive experiences, and that's relationships, and that's where you all come in. Next slide, please. So when we think about stress, there's three that are talked about. And these are the ones that are kind of very commonly referred to. And again, I just want to make sure that when we talk about stress, that we don't make stress this big bad thing, because a little bit of stress actually is helpful, and that's called positive stress. Think about when you're learning something, you need to actually gain a little bit of energy and attention and focus to learn something. And that's where positive stress comes in. Tolerable stress, in the yellow, is serious but temporary stress. And here's the key part: it's buffeted by supportive relationships. That's the key. Bruce Perry talks often about, yes, trauma matters, but who is there to help you to feel more comfortable and to make sense of it? And then the stress that we're really worried about is the toxic stress. That's the prolonged activation of stress and the stress response system in the absence of protective relationships. Next slide. So just to kind of show how child trauma is just a little bit different than adult trauma. So the physical and emotional response to events that threaten the life or the integrity of the child, or somebody who's critically important to the child. The key here is understanding that for a child, it's not just a threat to them, which is incredibly impactful, but it's also someone close to them. That's why when we see situations like domestic violence, even when the child is not a victim, a direct victim of it, they show the same signs as if they were. They are so connected and so part of their parent. And so when a traumatic event overwhelms a child's capacity to cope, and this is that just kind of emotional overwhelming, they have feelings of terror, powerlessness, and actually their bodies, their physiologic arousal gets out of control. Another important aspect of childhood trauma is it is traumatic when there is a failure to provide sensitive and mutually confirming interactions during critical developmental periods of life. So again, we'll talk about attachment and how attachment is affected by childhood trauma, but this is the key right there, is not meeting their needs. So inadequate parenting is also traumatic for a child. Next slide, please. And I just love this because when we're distressed, we all need someone to respond to us. And you can see in each of these pictures, in that one up in the top corner with the father, the child is calm. In the middle, you see the little girl by herself, but all the other ones have someone there. But you know that little girl is well attached because her arms are reaching out for someone to comfort her. And in the next slide, we'll see what happens when we are comforted. So just take a minute to look at this mom and this baby. And while you look at this, think about a time that you helped a child, a parent, a friend, a colleague, just downregulate when they were upset. It's really interesting because when we actually help somebody calm down, we create a sense of safety and pleasure for ourselves that creates a hormonal cascade that creates calm. It's pretty amazing. In doing that, we're helping, we're really helping at a biologic level. So, you know, when Ruth Newton talks about, you know, the body and how important the body is, this is what's happening. And in the next slide, we'll see what happens under stress. Before I talk about this slide, just so you know that stress actually affects the nervous system, the hormonal system, and the immune system. But this is a classic slide which has a lot going on, and I don't want you to spend too much time trying to figure it all out. But we all are taught about the fight or flight response, and that's what happens when we feel threatened. Another thing that happens is our systems can be overwhelmed and we can freeze. Well, we've always talked about these three: fight, flight, and freeze. But the part that we don't talk about is the part that you see on the far right side. That's when there's somebody there who helps us. And when somebody's there in times of stress and they help us, oxytocin is released. And what's really interesting in that is you affiliate or you attach to the person that helps you. So think about that picture we just saw right before. That's pretty amazing, right? That on a biological basis, when we help somebody calm down, they attach, they feel connected, they affiliate with us. And again, this is happening at a biochemical level. And so it's really amazing. So we think about fight or flight and freeze, that's when there's not someone there to help us. But when there is someone to help us, there's actually a positive response. Next slide, please. This is just showing all the different things that happen when we're stressed. When we're stressed, it affects every part of our body. So This is one of those slides where I probably should have made it a little bigger and a little clearer because it's a little hard to read, so I apologize for that. But basically, if you go down, it really looks at all of our body systems, whether it's our brain, whether it's insomnia, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart issues, whether it's issues around our digestion, whether it's around our reproductive organs, our muscles. Everything is affected by stress, which isn't turned off. And in the next slide, we see what the impact is. So I don't want you to get too caught up in the details. And so I kind of sum it up with what happens for children when they have that chronic stress, that toxic stress, and there's no supportive relationships, is there effects in the brain, there are effects in the body, there are effects in their behavior, and most importantly, there's effects in their relationships. So you could see how the attachment relationship gets disrupted. And with a disrupted attachment relationship, the problem is the way the child responds and the way the adult responds to the child isn't so easy. And so we actually end up having it be more challenging. So children who are traumatized can often be difficult for the parent. Often those children who've been traumatized have parents that are traumatized. So you see the cycle that happens. And not only is there issues around the relationship, there's issues around their physical well-being, their emotional well-being, their ability, their cognition, their ability to think, and their behavior. And we see changes in the brain. So the work that you do, and again, the exercise that we went through with the protective factors and how we help parents, this is changing this picture. This is changing things for each and every parent and child. And when you're working with the parents, you're actually helping them with their trauma when you're supporting them. Then they can better support their kids. And as Mariah said, the protective factors are so important in understanding that we really want to prevent child abuse. That's a huge positive. But the frame that we use in HDS is not only do we prevent child abuse, we enhance and we restore nurture. And I can't imagine anything better to do in one's life. And the work that you do is so important. So Mariah, this is, we're going to go to the breakout.
Yes, if you want to transition to the next slide.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd give a pause for a moment and see if there was any questions or comments. And again, you guys can use the chat box before we transition.
Thanks, Mariah. And just for all of you to know, I took my 90-minute presentation and boiled it down thanks to a lot of good input from my supportive relationships, all of the people who were at the AAP who we all work together.
All right.
Yeah, if you guys want to raise your, so if there's no other questions, we could move forward, or if anyone want to raise their hand or anything. Okay, just scanning the group. Looks like we can move forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we thought we'd do is give you guys a moment to kind of connect around some of the topics and talk a little bit about what Pradeep was presenting. So really start to think about what he shared and how this applies in the work that you do. So what do we do as care coordinators that supports parents feeling nurtured? So how do we recreate those experiences for families in the partnership that we have? So we're going to put you back in small groups. We really feel like that's helpful in the context because we know that when you're on a call with 30 people, most of us don't like to raise our hand and speak. So this way you can be in a little bit more of an intimate setting and talk about how the work that you do impacts families' stress levels and engagement. Did everybody see their little invitation? Sometimes it hides away on the screen there.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi to you too. For the person calling in on the phone, 619-876-4411, can you let us know who you are? If you hit unmute on your phone, we'll be able to hear you. So this is a different number than what we saw before. Mariah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
I don't know if I should put them in a breakout group or just leave them here during the small group.
I'm flexible.
All right. Well, okay then. And they hung up.
That's weird,
I know.
especially to have it happen twice.
I don't know.
Voyeurs.
Sorry, it sent you an invitation. There wasn't a way to select, like, randomly assign everybody but this person.
Oh no, that's okay. I had no problem randomly ignoring it. I don't like to do the small group. Coordination was kind of up and running. It was a challenging time though. We were coming out of the 2008 recession. The country was in an economic crisis. School districts and early intervention providers were facing drastic cuts to funding. Services like home visiting within HDS were going away. So the system was really going through a big change and a lot of uncertainty because we really weren't sure about what referrals were going to look like. Who would now be coming to us? People that used to go to early intervention, who would not be getting their needs met because we didn't have the same service. So there was a lot of individuals who are even in the room right now that sat around the table for many hours trying to figure this out and developing what would become the Level Identification Family Tool, or the LIFT. So this year was really about building that system that could meet those identified needs, right, in this evolving landscape. So it was, the processes were really system building. And we did a lot of training then. I mean, I'm looking at my little boxes and I see you there, Sally. And my first meeting with HDS was this care coordination meeting where the LIFT was being developed. And I remember being like, wow, this is big stuff. Like, we're making a tool here. We're trying to figure this out. It's like 10 of us at the table. How are we going to do this? And in stressful times, but we did it. And so from there, the LIFT is out and running. We also, at the same time, were getting new services. So we were now having this levels of services, level 1, level 2, level 3. So there really was a lot happening for the system to be growing in this way with all of this going on. So care coordination, we were kind of putting pen to paper. You guys were out on the ground doing services in the rather uncertain landscape. And in this time, the group became really savvy in identifying families. And this was really where the level guidelines came to be, right? It started to be a conversation at the table of, well, this is what families in level 1 are showing up with. This is what we're experiencing. And so by the winter of 2011, we had level guidelines. And the system by this time had a groove. We were supporting family. The system was building capacity. You know, we were over that hump of uncertainty, and the system was really coming together. And so in that, around 2013, when the system was kind of like chugging along, we recognized that care coordinators were facing some really difficult conversations and really working at a higher level to engage families. And that's when we brought in motivational interviewing. To really build the skill set and the capacity to support families. And when I say support families, I don't mean we're the end all be all. I mean, we have a way to connect with families in a meaningful way that guides them to be their own best partner, right? And so I think this was another big shift for the system in terms of really moving out of referral coordination, meeting basic needs, to really engaging in relationship building in a whole nother way, because we had this extra tool in our toolkit. And so we started to shift our processes to match this new approach. And that was really having us move away from the LIFT, which really was a score, right? And so we started to move to think bigger, I think, and using what we'd learned from MI practice and being with families, we developed the FEAT, or the Family Engagement and Assessment Tool. And so we really stepped away from, this isn't an assessment tool, we're giving the family a score, we're just kind of looking at a bunch of checklists, to we're really looking at the family as a whole, and we're thinking about what they need to engage in a way that's going to allow them and their child to feel successful. And we continued as a system to build. And so really focusing on not only the engagement that we have at the family level, but this is, you know, we were up and running with MDTs, care coordinators are really at the table with providers, and we're putting these pieces together. So really, the system has been going through a pretty significant evolution. And then, so how, in 2019, we realized that we were starting to hit another transition, starting to get to another place. Regions were asking for shifts. Jennifer and I went out and we met with the regional leadership and care coordinators. And these meetings really reflected a sophisticated and family-centered approach to assessment and engagement. The conversations also provided feedback on things that the FEAT was not achieving, or areas where the process could be improved. It highlighted the role that other service providers were playing. And so this was, again, why we wanted to touch on the process today, because we were now seeing an even more integrated approach to understanding families' needs, and really saying, no, we've got to get that developmental assessment, because that adds the next layer of information before we can really understand what a family needs. On the back end and the parallel, HDS is being recognized as a system that stands out. There's really been a national movement for what's called Help Me Grow, which is it started in Connecticut, but it's a national set of services that, if I put it very plainly, it's care coordinators who do screening, like developmental screenings, and they provide referral coordination for kiddos 0 to 5. And so we have a system like that in California in each county. And so we know we do something very similar here in HDS, except we have the icing on the cake, which is we have services buried into that. But nonetheless, we're being recognized by Help Me Grow for having strong systems in place. We've been doing this for a while. And so First Five San Diego really wants our work to be recognized. And so we started looking at, where are we at now as a system? Where are the national systems at, these bigger movements that we're involved in? Because we saw the opportunity for us to inform those systems and to create future pathways for funding and partnerships and leveraging the work that we're doing. So this really got us to the family profile. It was based on those visits with the regions, best practices in the field. We took lessons learned from implementing the LIFT, the FEAT, level guidelines, motivational interviewing, and really integrating in this new framework. The protective factors were already informally in the FEAT, but what we learned in the field is that care coordinators are really looking at the whole child and the whole family, not just the risk. And not just the pieces the family needs help with. You really have to step back and think more globally. And really recognizing that the family as the expert and thinking critically, or weighing, you know, this decisional balance that Jennifer and I will talk about today. You're really weighing what you see. It's not, I have this X factor, which means this. It's looking at the big picture. And again, just this opportunity to reflect on what you're seeing and make a thoughtful decision about what comes next. So I think these are all things that we saw. And I want to actually, before I move into talking about the process that was illuminated in that, I do want to give an opportunity to ask those of you that have been with us for a while to kind of feedback, because this is kind of a schema of what I've reflected on has gone on in the last 10 years. But I'm curious, again, Sally, you're still in my little cube there. You know, what is your reflection on how this system, how care coordination has really evolved?
Well, you just said it. I was just thinking about that, Mariah, that you just summarized the history of HDS and care coordination in such beautifully way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Having those conversations on how, what care coordination will look like in this system of care. I remember, especially for the SAT region, since we are the agency that provides the very heavily, even back then, all of the domestic violence programs, and then me coming with that background, even sharing how care coordination could support those families that were undergoing domestic violence and families with basic needs, and practically everything that care coordination does now. Like really amazing how this service, and in our previous conversation, Lily was in my group, we mentioned, and also Susan was saying how, you know, care coordination became the glue for the services.
Yeah.
Just really amazing.
Definitely. Well said. Yes, I like that. I like that analogy. I see it as the glue. Any others that, Susan, I know there's others that have been here for a long time, and even there's a few care coordinators on here. Tara, I'm seeing you in my box now of those of you that have been here from the beginning through all of this. Where do you see care coordination, or what have you recognized about this process?
Well, I can share that I think the growth that we've seen in this service area has really grown across the board in all of the other service areas too, because we have really been the glue. We've seen the evolution of our system of care and the collaboration. I know I can speak to our region, how meeting weekly, connecting case by case, really having those conversations, those conferences and team planning that includes the parents, so that we can really put forth the, you know, the effort of support, empowerment, and advocacy for that family. And I know I'm super proud of our region because we have been together for quite a while, and our team as a whole has really always spoken to how integral and how important our care coordination team is. And I like the analogy of the glue too. I think that's never been more true.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I would think even more so in times of strain, right? I know that you guys have had to build a lot of bridges in the last few months as the world experiences so many shifts. Any others, reflections, thoughts about the shifts for some of you that have been here for so long, or even some of you that have just seen some of the more recent shifts? Oh, Laura, did you want to come on? You're muted. There you go.
Hear me now? Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, yeah. I see the difference from the lift, the feed, now the family profile, because in the lift and the feed, we did the work for our developmental services folks. But now with the family profile, I see more wide. Now we have to, sometimes family doesn't share information at the beginning with the care coordinator, but the family will share more information with a developmental specialist, a behavior specialist. And since in North Inland, we have a case conference every week about the families, about the results of the developmental assessment. It's more like a round. We see the family as a whole, and
Yes.
all the services, all the needs that the family and the child they need. I think there's a big jump for us to see that.
Yeah.
It not only depends on care coordinator, but input from the developmental specialist and the behavior also.
Definitely. Well, that's actually a perfect transition to my next slide. Thank you. Thank you for that, Laura. She's really speaking to this process. And so a few years ago, we were trying to outline the service of care coordination. And so if you've been in the implementation guides, you've seen a circular process. And Jennifer and I were pretty impressed when we went out, because we saw how this assessment window had really expanded. You know, from that referral form, you are doing this kind of informal assessment with families. And then there's that first connect. And, you know, I think one of the biggest things to take away from all of this, and I heard this in what Laura shared, is that this isn't about filling out a form. This isn't about getting the family intake done. Going back to what Pradeep shared, this is about understanding the family, building a relationship with the family, learning about what matters to them. And you start doing that the minute you look at the referral form, right? Like you and your mind are already kind of going through this process of trying to understand this family. And then you conduct the family intake. Again, it's a form, it's a requirement, but there's something much bigger happening there. There's conversations. I mean, it's not like you go through, I know all of you, how you facilitate these. It's not a, let me ask you one question. It's a, I'd like to get to know you and know about why you're here and understand you and your child. And so from there, you go to, you're starting to listen for what's in the family profile from the time you get the referral. You do the family intake, and we'll talk about the forms themselves this afternoon, but you're really assessing parent readiness. You're looking at strengths, you're looking at risks, you're going to be soliciting that provider feedback, whether it's in a consultation or a call, really creating the whole picture. This is the way we're calling it a family profile, because it's a picture of the family's experience. And it's really based on what you've heard, what you've seen, what you've heard from others within your team. So really providing a more robust picture of this family that will better inform their needs and what we can anticipate in terms of the support they might need from care coordination. And as you can see at the bottom, we've kind of brought in pieces that were not in the process before. So this developmental assessment, that may be our first time to get eyes on the child and the parent together. Obviously, that brings in a whole other layer of information. And then from there, you're building this profile across the way. Services may get started, and you'll be determining your level. Again, the tool looks different. The process is what we heard in the field, and we'll talk more about that this afternoon. And then you complete the profile, and that kind of sends you into that circular image that we used to use, which is kind of the way the services roll out, and families, may leave, they may come back. But the point is, we really wanted to convey this larger picture of this assessment process that's really about taking this kind of broad view of a family's experience. What are they ready for? Where are they at? And how do we leverage their strengths and support their risks? So this is really where we've evolved quite a bit as a system. And like I said, I was relatively blown out of the water. It just wasn't what I was expecting to hear. And what was interesting, as I mentioned, is that Jennifer and I went to each region, and this showed up in each region. And these weren't conversations we had at a regional level. This was just kind of how this service has evolved over time with the expertise and the skill that has increased. So it's pretty exciting stuff. And we're looking forward to really digging into putting this into play, starting with this afternoon. So in the interest of time, I'm going to pass it to Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Mariah, for the overview and the history and the richness of how we got to where we are today. And so thank you guys for spending your morning with us. We're reconvening at 1 o'clock. And as you'll see on the screen, it is a unique Zoom link. So please refer back to your calendar invite to access the meeting. I will also put it in the chat box right now. And if you can, when we return, we're going to dig into the tools, as Mariah mentioned. So please have access to this PowerPoint and access to the family intake and the family profile. You can also have the manual nearby if you'd like to consult that, but that's not required. We have put all these documents up on our HDS document archive. So if you can't find your email or whatnot, please, you can head on over to the document archive. So thank you guys for your participation and coming and joining us today. And we'll see you at 1 o'clock. I hope you take some time, maybe get a breath of fresh air outside. And Mariah and I will stay on for a few more minutes if anyone needs anything. And let me just pop this link into the chat box. Let's see. I'm not having success with that for some reason. Well, I think if anyone needs access, you can't find your link on the calendar invite, there you go. Thank you for Mariah. Quick fingers, appreciate that. So, well, without further ado, enjoy your 90-minute break, and we'll see you back at 1 o'clock, and I'll stay on for a little bit longer. So thanks, everyone.